Listen to that rain, the perfect sound to accompany a story. Welcome, friend. This is our special place, designed to send a chill down your spine while you're wrapped up warm and safe. A strange kind of comfort, isn't it? If you enjoy this feeling, please consider subscribing and ringing the bell so you never miss our nightly tales from the shadows. It helps our small community grow. Now, settle in and let the story begin. When you were a mall cop, you get used to the weird noises an empty building makes at night. But you never get used to the sound of something that's supposed to be made of plastic taking a step. At the old Westbrook Mall, the mannequins don't just wear the clothes, they wear the memories. I took the night guard job at the Westbrook Mall because it was easy and it paid the bills. The place was a relic from the 80s, a dying mall with more vacant storefronts than open ones. My shift was a long, silent walk through its dimly lit, echoing halls. From midnight to 6 a.m., the only sound was the hum of the emergency lights and the squeak of my own shoes on the polished linoleum. I was a ghost in a ghost town of consumerism. My patrol route included the one place all the other guards hated, the sealed-off North Wing. It used to house a massive high-end department store called Crawford's before it went bankrupt years ago. The wing was blocked off to the public by a metal gate, but I had the key. It was my job to walk through it once a night to check for leaks or squatters. The moment you stepped into the North Wing, the air changed. It was cold, still, and smelled of dust and forgotten perfume. It was a time capsule. The main concourse of the old store was filled with dozens of mannequins, frozen in eerie, cheerful poses from a bygone era. Mannequin families laughing together, mannequin couples holding hands. Their painted smiles and blank, lifeless eyes were the creepiest part of the whole mall. One night, about a month into the job, I noticed something was wrong. There was a prominent display near the entrance featuring a single, elegant female mannequin in a striking red dress. When I had started my patrol, I was sure she was facing forward, looking out into the concourse. But now, as I was walking back, her head was turned slightly to the right, her blank face aimed directly at the service corridor I had just walked out of. My heart did a little trip hammer beat. I told myself it was just my mind playing tricks on me, that I had misremembered, or maybe one of the day crew had been in here and bumped it. I tried to force a rational explanation, but the feeling of being watched was overwhelming. I finished my patrol and locked the gate behind me, eager to get back to the familiar, less creepy part of the mall. On my way out of the wing, on my final check, I glanced back at the mannequin in the red dress. Her head was no longer looking at the corridor. It was now tilted down, her painted face looking at the dusty floor in front of her. And there, on the floor, in a spot I am positive was empty before, was a small, shiny object glinting in the beam of my flashlight. It was a woman's silver locket. I stood there for a full minute, just staring at the locket on the floor. I didn't want to touch it, but leaving it felt wrong. It was evidence of what? I finally picked it up. It felt cold and heavy in my hand. I pocketed it and got out of there, my mind racing. racing. I wrote in my nightly log that I found the door to the wing unlocked and that a mannequin had been tampered with. I left out the part about the locket. They'd think I was crazy. The next night, I was dreading my patrol of the North Wing. As I unlocked the gate and stepped inside, the scene was even more disturbing than before. The main display was completely different. The dozen or so mannequins, which had been spread out in their own individual poses, had all moved. They were now clustered together in the center of the platform, their bodies all turned to face the mannequin in the red dress. It was like they had formed an audience, and she was the main attraction. And then I heard it, a faint, muffled sound coming from deeper within the abandoned store. It was the sound of voices, like a crowd of people whispering excitedly. It was so quiet, it was almost on the edge of my hearing, and underneath it I could hear the faint, tinny strains of an old waltz, the kind you'd hear in a black and white movie. My training told me to call it in, to wait for backup. My morbid curiosity pushed me forward. I walked deeper into the dark, silent store, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. I found a new tableau in what used to be the men's formal wear department. A male mannequin, once part of a tuxedo display, had been moved. It was now positioned in front of a large, shattered three-way mirror. Its plastic hand was raised, and in it was holding a single, long-dead, dried-out rose. I felt the cold weight of the locket in my pocket. I pulled it out, my fingers fumbling with the clasp. I opened it. Inside were two tiny, faded black and white photos. On one side, a beautiful, smiling young woman with dark, wavy hair. On the other, a handsome young man in a suit, a confident smile on his face. I looked up from the locket, a wave of cold dread washing over me. The face of the woman in the photo was a perfect human match for the elegant sculpted face of the mannequin in the red dress. And the man in the photo, he had the same strong jawline and proud posture as the mannequin holding the rose. The mannequins weren't just moving, they were telling a story, their story.
I became obsessed. I spent the next few nights not as a security guard, but as a detective, a ghost hunter. Each time I entered the North Wing, the mannequins had created a new scene, a new chapter in their silent, slow-motion play. One night, I found the two main mannequins posed together, their plastic hands interlocked in a mock dance in the middle of the concourse, while the other mannequins watched from the shadows. Another night, the male mannequin was on one knee before the female one, the dead rose held out in offering. I had to know the real story. I spent my days off at the local library, digging through old microfilms of the town newspaper. And I found it. An article from October 1988. The headline was, "Tragedy at Westbrook Mall." The story was heartbreaking. A young couple, Eleanor Vance and James Croft, had both worked at the Crawford's department store. They were local sweethearts, set to be married in a week. A small electrical fire had broken out late one night in the store's stockroom.
James, who had already gotten out safely, thought Eleanor was still trapped inside. He ran back into the smoke-filled building to find her. He never came out. The tragic irony was that Eleanor had already escaped through a different exit. A few days later, consumed by a grief she couldn't handle, she climbed to the roof of the mall and jumped. I sat there in the quiet library, the story on the screen blurring through my tears. The mannequins weren't a haunting, they were an echo. The powerful residual energy of that tragedy soaked into the very fabric of the place, playing out a love story for an audience of no one. The scenes in the store became more desperate, more frantic. I found the James mannequin posed with its hands against a locked service door, its body tilted forward as if trying to break it down. I found the Eleanor mannequin at the top of a stalled escalator, its arms outstretched, its blank face aimed up towards the skylight and the roof, a silent reenactment of her final moments. On my last shift of the week, I entered the North Wing, prepared for the next scene in the tragic play. But the concourse was empty. All the mannequins, every single one, were gone. I followed a series of scuff marks on the dusty floor. They led to a heavy steel door marked "Stairs to Roof," a door that was always locked. I put my ear to the cold metal, and from the other side, I heard it. The soft, dry, plastic-on-plastic scraping sound of dozens of mannequins, slowly, methodically, climbing the stairs.
Every instinct in my body screamed at me to run, to lock the gate to the North Wing and never come back. But I couldn't. I had followed their story this far. I had to see the end. I used my master key on the stairwell door. The lock turned with a heavy clunk, and the door swung open into a dark, concrete stairwell. I followed the scraping sounds up, my flashlight beam dancing off the concrete walls. I reached the door to the roof. It was slightly ajar, a sliver of the moonlit night sky visible through the crack. I pushed it open and stepped out into the cold, windy night. The sight before me stole the breath from my lungs. Every single mannequin from the department store was on the roof, dozens of them. They were arranged in two silent, solemn groups, forming a wide aisle, like guests at a wedding. At the end of the aisle, standing near the edge of the roof, were the two main figures, James and Eleanor. They were posed as if for a wedding portrait, their plastic hands almost touching. As I watched, a gust of wind or something else pushed the Eleanor mannequin. It began to slowly, gracefully climb up onto the concrete ledge at the very edge of the roof. The other mannequins, all of them, slowly turned their heads in perfect, silent unison, their blank, featureless faces watching her. This was it, the reenactment of the final tragic act. Without thinking, driven by a foolish human need to intervene, I yelled out, my voice raw against the wind. "Don't!" I ran forward. I grabbed the cold, smooth arm of the Eleanor mannequin and pulled it back from the ledge, back to safety. The moment my skin touched the plastic, a wave of intense, unnatural cold washed over me. The wind howled, and every other mannequin on the roof slowly, deliberately turned its head away from the couple on the ledge and towards me. Their dozens of blank,
identical, accusing faces were all fixed on me. I had interfered. I had interrupted the performance. I had broken the loop. I don't remember running. I don't remember how I got off that roof. My next memory is waking up in my car in the mall parking lot, the sun just beginning to rise, the silver locket clutched in my fist. I quit my job that morning. It's been years. I moved to a different state, tried to start a new life. I tried to forget. But last month I saw an article online. The old Westbrook Mall was finally being demolished to make way for a new development. The article included a photo gallery of the demolition. I clicked through the pictures of crumbling walls and twisted metal. The last photo was of the north wing. The demolition crew had just broken through the main wall, and there, in the center of the dusty, debris-strewn space, was a new, final tableau. The James mannequin was on one knee. The Eleanor mannequin was standing before him, her hand outstretched to accept his proposal. And standing just behind them, his plastic hands placed gently on their shoulders as if officiating their wedding, was a third, new mannequin. A mannequin wearing a dusty, tattered night guard's uniform.
When you take a job as a night guard at a cold storage facility, you expect two things, the cold and the quiet. The old-timers give you a third thing to expect, a set of rules. Never let the temperature drop below 0, and never, ever follow a sound into the deep freeze. I thought they were hazing the new guy. They were trying to keep me alive. After 30 years on the factory line, the company downsized and my pension vanished. At 55, the only job I could get was a night guard position at the Halcyon Cold Storage Warehouse. It was a massive, windowless concrete box on the edge of town, a place where companies stored millions of pounds of frozen food. The guy I was replacing, a grizzled old-timer named Sal, walked me through my duties on my first night. The place was a maze of towering metal shelves stacked high with pallets of frozen goods, all under the deafening, monotonous hum of the industrial refrigeration units. The cold was a living thing, biting at any exposed skin. You could see your breath in every room. "It's an easy gig, Frank," Sal said, his voice raspy. "It's just you and the noise, but there are rules." He pointed to a large industrial thermostat in the main control room. "Rule 1, the big boy, sub-zero, never goes into the red. 0 degrees Fahrenheit is the limit. If it dips below, you gotta go in and manually reset the auxiliary valve. It's a pain, but you do it." Then he looked at me, his eyes serious. "Rule 2, if you hear something weird coming from inside Sub-Zero, you ignore it. You lock the door and you walk away. Some echoes, they get frozen into the walls in a place this cold." He told me the obligatory ghost story. Years ago, a worker named Charlie got trapped inside the main freezer during a power failure. They didn't find him for 2 days. Sal said the old-timers call the ghost Old Frost. I just nodded along,
a cynical smile on my face. I'd worked in factories my whole life. I knew all about hazing the new guy with spooky stories. My first few nights were just as Sal described, cold and quiet, except for the constant deafening hum of the industrial refrigeration units. The cold was a living thing, biting at any exposed skin. You could see your breath in every room. "It's an easy gig, Frank," Sal said, his voice raspy. "It's just you and the noise, but there are rules." He pointed to a large industrial thermostat in the main control room. "Rule 1, the big boy, sub-zero, never goes into the red. 0 degrees Fahrenheit is the limit. If it dips below, you gotta go in and manually reset the auxiliary valve. It's a pain, but you do it." He then looked at me, his eyes serious. "Rule 2, if you hear something weird coming from inside Sub-Zero, you ignore it. You lock the door and you walk away. Some echoes, they get frozen into the walls in a place this cold." I thought they were hazing the new guy. They were trying to keep me alive. My first few nights were just as Sal described, cold and quiet, except for the constant deafening hum of the fans. I almost fell asleep in the control room one night when an alarm beeped. I looked at the thermostat. The digital display for the main Sub-Zero freezer was blinking. The temperature was -2 degrees Fahrenheit. It was in the red. With a heavy sigh, I pulled on the ridiculously thick parka they provided, grabbed my flashlight, and headed for the main freezer. I was a practical man. I wasn't worried about ghosts. I was worried about a multi-million-dollar inventory of frozen food thawing out. As I walked down a long, foggy aisle, my breath pluming in front of me, I heard a sound that cut cleanly through the hum of the fans. A soft, rhythmic thump, 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 like someone gently knocking against one of the metal shelves, coming from deep within the frozen maze.
Sal's warning echoed in my head. Never follow a sound. But I was a mechanic for 30 years. A strange rhythmic thump meant a malfunctioning motor or a loose fan blade. That was a problem I needed to fix. Ignoring it was irresponsible. I followed the sound, my flashlight beam cutting through the thick, cold fog that swirled around my feet. The thumping led me to the very back of the massive freezer, an older, unused section where the shelves were mostly empty. The moment my light hit the back wall, the sound stopped. I swept my beam across the shelves. Nothing, just empty pallets and a thick layer of frost. Then I saw it. On a high shelf, a single shrink-wrapped side of beef was swinging gently back and forth, as if it had just been pushed. I got a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. I found the auxiliary valve, reset it, and got the hell out of there. The image of that swinging slab of meat burned into my mind. The next night, it happened again. The temperature dropped into the red. This time when I went in, the sound was different. It was a low, scraping sound, like a metal shovel being dragged across a frozen concrete floor. I followed it again, and again it stopped as I got close. I found nothing except for long, deep scratch marks in the thick ice on the floor, leading from one aisle to another. The presence, whatever it was, started to get bolder. It started to interact with my world outside the freezer.
I'd leave my hot coffee thermos in the warm control room. When I came back from a patrol, it would be covered in a thick, impossible layer of frost, the coffee inside slushy and cold. The heavy, insulated door to Sub-Zero, which I was positive I had closed and sealed, would be standing slightly ajar. A lazy cloud of freezing fog spilling out into the hallway like a sigh. I was scared, but I was also angry. I was going to prove I wasn't crazy. I went to the security office and pulled up the archived footage from the camera inside Sub-Zero. I spent hours scrubbing through the video, which was mostly just a static, foggy image. Then I found something. I saw a patch of the fog in the far corner of the screen seem to thicken. It swirled and coalesced, forming a vague, shimmering, man-shaped figure for just a split second. And then a bright flash of what looked like electrical static whited out the screen. When the image returned a second later, the fog was normal again, but the side of beef on the shelf, which had been perfectly still, was now swinging back and forth. The video was my proof. I wasn't imagining things. There was something in there, something made of cold and static. I finally understood Sal's warning. It wasn't a joke. One night, the entire facility went black. A loud clang echoed through the building as the main power grid failed. The backup generator kicked in a moment later, restoring the dim emergency lights, but not the main refrigeration units. And for the first time, I heard the true sound of the warehouse. The deafening hum of the machinery was gone, replaced by a terrifying, dripping silence. My only job in a power failure was to ensure all freezer doors remained sealed to keep the product from thawing. I did my rounds. Every door was secure, except one. The massive, insulated door to Sub-Zero was standing open wide, a thick, heavy fog pouring out into the silent warehouse. It was a trap. I knew it. It was out. The silence meant it was no longer confined to its cold, noisy prison. The entire dark, cavernous warehouse was its new hunting ground. And I was the only thing in it. I spent the next hour being hunted. I would hear the familiar scraping sound, always from just one aisle over. I'd see a flicker of movement in the deep shadows, something impossibly pale and fast. The warehouse was getting warmer, the concrete floor becoming slick with melting ice, making my every step a treacherous, noisy risk. It was toying with me, a cat and mouse game in a dark, dripping maze. I finally found a place to hide, in the refrigerated dairy aisle. It was the coldest place in the main warehouse, the air still biting. I crouched behind a pallet of milk crates, trying to control my breathing, my breath pluming in front of me. And then I saw him. At the far end of the long aisle, he stepped out from behind a shelf. He wasn't a shimmer of fog or a glitch on a camera. He was solid. He was a man, or what was left of one. He was impossibly pale, his skin a patchwork of waxy white and deep blue, the telltale signs of severe, old frostbite. He wore the tattered remains of a worker's uniform, and his eyebrows and thin hair were white with a permanent frozen crust. It was Old Frost, and he didn't look like a ghost. He looked hungry. He saw me. His head snapped in my direction. He opened his mouth, and instead of a scream or a word, a thick cloud of freezing fog billowed out like a dragon's breath. He raised a hand, its fingers long and white with frost, and the glass doors of the dairy coolers that lined the aisle next to me exploded inwards, one after another, showering me with a wave of freezing cold milk and shattered glass. I ran. I scrambled over the broken glass and sprinted out of the aisle, the sound of his slow, scraping footsteps echoing behind me. I knew I couldn't fight him. He was a creature of the cold, but out here, in the dripping relative warmth of the powerless warehouse, he seemed stronger, faster. The melting ice was his territory. My only hope was to take that away from him. I made a desperate, insane dash for the main engine room at the back of the facility. The creature was after me, the scraping sound getting closer, joined now by a low, guttural, rattling sound, the sound of a frozen lung trying to breathe. I burst into the engine room. The huge diesel backup generator for the refrigeration units was silent. The manual override was a huge red lever protected by a glass case. I shattered the glass with my flashlight and threw my entire body weight against the lever. With a deafening roar, the generator sputtered to life. The deafening hum of the warehouse returned, a sound I had hated just hours before, but which was now the sound of salvation. A blast of freezing cold air began to pump through the massive vents. The system was coming back online. I ran back out into the main warehouse, back toward the open door of Sub-Zero. I could hear the creature let out a pained, hissing roar from a few aisles away as the temperature in the building began to plummet. I had to lure it back into its cage. "Hey!" I screamed, my voice raw. "Over here, you son of a bitch!" It worked. I saw its pale form emerge at the end of an aisle and begin to move towards me, slower now, more sluggish. The returning cold was weakening it. I led it on a chase back into the freezing, foggy maze of Sub-Zero, deeper and deeper, until we were at the very back wall where I'd first heard the thumping. I kicked a shelf, sending a shower of ice down, distracting it for a second, and then I ran. I sprinted back through the aisles, not daring to look back, my lungs burning from the freezing air. I threw myself through the doorway and slammed the massive insulated door shut. I spun the wheel, the heavy bolts sliding into place with a series of satisfying, final thunks. I stood there, panting, my ear pressed against the cold steel. I heard a single furious bang from the inside of the door, and then silence. I had won. I quit the next day. Sal just gave me a nodding nod when I handed in my keys. A month later, I read a small article in the local paper. The Halyan warehouse had been bought out. The new owners were upgrading the facility, installing a new, state-of-the-art cryogenic freezing core in the main Sub-Zero unit. The article ended with a strange quote from the new facility manager. "It's amazing technology," the manager said. "We can get the core down to 100 degrees below zero. But the funny thing is, when the technicians went in to dismantle the old unit, they found it was already running at that temperature, colder even. And they found something else inside, frozen solid to the old cooling pipes. It looked almost human." My first security job was at The Pinnacle, a brand new luxury apartment tower still mostly empty. My main duty was to watch the 100+ security cameras covering every hall and corridor. My second week there, I started seeing him. A man on the cameras who was never there in person. The management told me it was a system glitch, but glitches don't leave wet footprints by the pool. I started seeing him every few nights. I called him the resident. He'd appear on a random empty floor, sometimes just standing, sometimes walking slowly down a hallway before fading away. I followed my boss's orders. I logged it. I ignored it. But it was impossible to ignore. The barrier between a harmless glitch and something truly terrifying was crossed on a Saturday night. I was watching the camera for the rooftop pool area. The water in the Olympic-sized pool was a perfect, still, mirror-like surface. Then the resident appeared on the camera feed. He walked to the edge of the pool, his movements smooth and real, and he sat down, his legs dangling over the side. On my screen, I could see the image of a man sitting at the edge of the pool, but I knew with absolute certainty that if I looked at the other monitors showing the wider area, or if I went up there, he wouldn't be there. But then I saw it. In the real still water of the pool, a set of ripples began to radiate outwards from the edge, right where his feet would be. The water was moving. The camera showed a man who wasn't there, but the water was behaving as if he was. I ran. I took the elevator to the roof, my heart in my throat. The rooftop was empty, silent, but the deck around the edge of the pool was wet, and leading away from the spot where he had been sitting on the camera were two wet footprints on the concrete, which stopped abruptly after just 2 steps. He could interact with the world. This wasn't image retention. This was something else. He started leaving things for me, as if to prove it. I'd watch him on the camera in the empty, state-of-the-art gym, picking up a single 5-pound red dumbbell. An hour later, on my patrol, I'd find that same red dumbbell sitting in the middle of the gym floor. He was a ghost in the machine, a ghost who could lift things. His awareness of me grew. One night I saw him appear on the feed for the 13th floor. It wasn't a real floor, just a concrete, unfinished maintenance level between 12 and 14 to appease superstitious buyers. The camera was just a single static shot of an empty, dark room. The resident was standing in the center. He slowly turned and looked directly into the camera lens, at me. He raised a hand and pointed not at me, but at another camera, a small dome camera in the far corner of the room, a camera that wasn't on my main console, a camera that was aimed at the back of the camera he was looking at. He was showing me his trick. He was proving that he only existed for one camera at a time. He was a living, breathing blind spot. I was no longer just a security guard. I was an investigator, the sole audience to an impossible magic trick. My nights became a tense game of cat and mouse, me sitting in my chair, him dancing between the digital eyes of the building. I was terrified, but a part of me, the part that was a curious grad student, was also fascinated. He started to communicate. I was watching him on a camera in an empty, unfurnished apartment on the 25th floor. He walked to a wall and began to tap his finger against it. I couldn't hear anything on the audio feed, but a moment later, I heard the sound right behind me. Tap, 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 coming from the wall of my own security office in the lobby. I spun around. The wall was empty. He was using the building structure as a telegraph, sending his message from the 25th floor directly to me. He started leading me on hunts. He'd appear on a camera on the 5th floor. I'd switch my main screen to that feed. He'd stand there for a moment, then fade. A second later, he'd appear on the 7th floor camera, then the 7th. He was leading me up the building, one floor at a time, a silent, digital ascension. He was always leading me toward the same place, the 13th floor. It was an invitation. The final invitation was the most direct. I was watching him on the 12th floor camera, just outside the stairwell door. He walked to the door, opened it, and held it open, his blank face looking directly into the camera lens, a clear gesture for me to follow. I immediately switched to the camera on the inside of that same stairwell. On that monitor, the door was firmly shut. The invitation was a private one, a reality that existed only on the screen he chose to show me. My phone buzzed. It was a text message from an unknown number. There were no words, just a grainy, low-resolution image. It was a picture of the back of my own head, taken from a high angle as I sat there in the security office, staring at the wall of monitors. He wasn't just in the cameras anymore. He was everywhere. The text was followed by another. Come up. I want to show you the real view.
I knew it was a trap. I knew I should call the police, my boss, anyone. But what would I say? I had to see it through. I had to know what he was. I took the elevator to the 12th floor. I walked to the stairwell door. It was, as the other camera had shown, closed and locked. I used my master key. The lock turned and I stepped into the quiet concrete stairwell. I walked up the single flight of stairs to the heavy, unmarked fire door of the 13th floor. I pushed it open and stepped inside. The door slammed shut behind me with a deafening boom, plunging me into near total darkness. The room was cold, empty, and smelled of wet concrete. I was alone. My phone buzzed in my hand. Another text. Turn around. I turned, and my heart stopped. Standing in front of the now sealed door was the man in the suit, but I wasn't seeing him with my eyes. The room was still empty. I was seeing him on my phone screen. The camera on my phone somehow picking him up like a bizarre augmented reality filter. He was not physically there, but he was digitally present. The figure on my screen raised a hand and pointed at me. My phone screen flickered and the image shifted. It was now showing me the view from the main security camera in this room, the one I had been watching on my monitors downstairs. On the screen, I could see myself, standing alone in the empty concrete room, staring at my phone. And standing right behind me, his hands placed gently on my shoulders, was the man in the suit. His image was on the security feed, but when I frantically looked over my own shoulder, there was nothing there but empty air.
The figure on the screen, the one behind me that wasn't there, leaned forward, its mouth close to my ear on the screen. And a voice whispered, not from my phone, but from every corner of the room at once, a voice made of static and electricity. "You see, you're a glitch too. You're here in this room, but you're not. You're just a collection of data, an image on a screen, just like me." The door behind me swung open. I didn't hesitate. I ran out of that building, out of that job, out of that city. It's been a year. I try to live a normal life, but I can't escape the feeling that I'm being watched. A few weeks ago, I was in a department store, trying on clothes. I glanced up at the small black dome of a security camera in the corner of the ceiling, and for a split second I saw it. The camera's little red light wasn't just on, it flickered, a quick, rhythmic double flicker, the same pattern the resident used to tap on the wall. He's not tied to that building. He's a ghost in the machine, a glitch in the global network. He can travel through any camera, any screen. He wasn't the resident of floor 13. He's the resident of our entire wired world. And he's just letting me know, every now and then, that he's still watching his favorite show.